Good morning, entrepreneurs. We are back. It is Wednesday. You are tuned in to the Non-Corporate Network. You're making a good decision this morning. This is the worldwide leader in entrepreneurship, and we are Entreprenews. Dustin, anything you want to mention to them about Entreprenews, where they can find us?
Yeah, appreciate you guys tuning in. Basically, anywhere that you guys consume content, you can find us, whether it be YouTube, Facebook, our website, iTunes, Google Podcast, whatever it may be. Search for Entreprenews and you'll find us.
Yeah, and I mean, just so you know the format, if you haven't joined us before, we take the top 6 trending small business stories, we debate them for 3 minutes apiece, and we get to the bottom of what the real truth is. We keep you woke. It's not free to listen today. I'm sorry. We had to start charging, and your admission ticket is in the form of telling an entrepreneur about us, telling a business owner about us, so we can also keep them woke with the undiluted real truth of what's going on in the small business world. How's that sound, Dustin?
That sounds stupendous.
Awesome.
Well said.
Thank you. Well, without further ado, I think we're about ready to get in our first story.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and dive into our first story. So the U.S. sues Visa to block its acquisition of Plaid. The Department of Justice filed an antitrust lawsuit to block Visa's planned acquisition of the fintech startup Plaid, alleging that it would limit competition in the industry. The attorneys cited the Visa CEO's description of the $5.3 billion deal as an insurance policy that would neutralize the threat to their important debit business. The Justice Department also said that Visa rarely faces any significant threats to its online debit monopoly, and Plaid is such a threat. This would put them at about 95% market share in the online debit category. I mean, that's obviously pushing the lines of antitrust. It's almost 100% market share. But knowing that, I mean, should the Department of Justice be opening an investigation even sooner? I mean, knowing how much of the market share Visa has?
Yeah, I mean, you know, we're getting pretty crazy up there on Capitol Hill with these antitrust suits, right? I mean, we're hearing about Facebook, and we're hearing about Google, and we're hearing about Amazon, and now Visa's in the mix, Apple's in the mix. I mean, we're all over the place. So I think it's interesting. You know, there's definitely some threats here. Although Visa only has a 41% market share in like this in-person point of sale system transaction debit cards, they've got a huge market share in the online presence. And I mean, Plaid, for those of you that aren't familiar, it's the back end for Venmo. It's the back end for Acorns. There's a lot of companies that are coming out that are using Plaid. And so, yeah, I mean, they're kind of taking that mantra that most big Fortune 50 businesses take and go, 5.3 billion? That's nothing compared to us getting beat by them. We'll just buy them up so that, you know, we don't have to worry about it. But yeah, being at 70% in the space of online specifically, this definitely puts them over the edge. And yeah, I mean, I don't think the end is going to be good for the consumer. Obviously, they're out to make money, and that's exactly what they're going to do.
Yep, they'll just charge merchants more, and then merchants have to charge more, and ultimately the consumer is one that faces it, which is typically what's at the center of antitrust lawsuits. My question is, knowing that there are very few players in the space and that e-commerce continues to grow, how are there not more competitors joining the space? I mean, you would think there would be tons of money or tons of capital that people would be investing to start companies like this to compete with Visa. Yep. If Visa's the only one, then it sounds like there's a lot of opportunity in this space.
I think the big thing here is that there's just a big barrier to entry, right? Like you have to invest quite a bit. You can't just get a startup and bootstrap it and take on Visa. You know, there's so much more red tape in the fintech industry. And so I think that, yeah, there's definitely a need for somebody to come out of the woodwork. And we thought that might be Plaid, but we'll see if the acquisition actually goes through, Dustin. I mean, you know, Sprint and T-Mobile acquisition. I mean, it's obviously a smaller one, but than that, but took 2 years. So who knows what's going to happen.
Yep. So going on to our next story. So the feds lower the minimum loan level for small business lending program. The Federal Reserve has lowered the barriers on its lending program for smaller businesses as part of an effort to broaden the appeal of the sparsely used facilities or the funds. And so The Fed said it's reducing the minimum size to $100,000 from 250 grand. That's quite a few drop, quite a big drop. And the central bank will also ease restrictions on debt for companies already participating in the Paycheck Protection Program. I mean, is this good or is this bad? I mean, I know that money is a lifeline to businesses. It is good, but I mean, are we kicking the can down the road and giving money to businesses that are eventually going to fail anyways? Or, is this going to stimulate the economy and create jobs?
Yeah, I mean, I like the idea of the program compared to what they first went with, which was obviously a lot of fraud came from that. There was a lot of businesses that used it as a lifeline to get them 3 more months before they went under, and so I think that the whole idea of Main Street Lending Program is to qualify people a little bit better for loans before giving them out. And obviously that makes it a little bit more defensible that they're going to recover that money and stimulate the right businesses. But I think that obviously this is not meant for small business when you're talking about the minimum loan size is 250 grand. So, I think dropping the barrier a little bit is good. I'm sure they wanted to start with bigger businesses and kind of get the whole process right with a little bit more legitimate mid-sized businesses before kind of going down. But the capacity for they gave out 400 loans for $3.7 billion. They have a capacity of $600 billion. And so I think that there's obviously just tip of the iceberg here. I mean, I thought one thing that was very interesting was Main Street loans are aimed at companies with fewer than 15,000 employees with revenues less than $5 billion. It's like, how are we calling this the
98%.
Small Business Loan Program? You're talking about $5 billion in revenue to get you a loan. But, I think it's interesting. I hope that we continue to drop that barrier and make it as accessible as we can for super small businesses, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, cash flow is the lifeline to small business, and it is good that they lowered the amount that you can borrow. It's gonna allow a lot more businesses to get funds that they need. The thing that worries me is that they also loosen the restrictions of debt to income ratio. I mean, basically, it's a little more risky, or companies that are on the verge of bankruptcy or whatever it may be.
Right.
I mean, it's basically what we saw in 2008. It's people that might not qualify were just given loans, and eventually we saw what happened there, and that's what I kind of worry. It's a tough balance. I mean, you gotta get cash in the hands of these businesses so they can continue to operate, but it could be wasting tons of capital as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's that or unemployment though,
Yeah.
right? Like you're gonna pay something.
Yep. So bringing it back here to Arizona, so the cost of doing business is increasing here in the state. With minimum wage going up every year for the last 4 years, part of law of the past, I think in 2016. It'll go up the next couple years as well, and eventually get to I think it's $15.50 an hour. And then with 208 passing, business owners and those that are making $250K individually or $500K married are basically being taxed twice as much. The reason AZ has grown has been due to cheap cost of living. It's cheap to do business, and now that doesn't seem to be the case. I mean, is this going to negatively impact the growth of Arizona, or are the incremental tax revenues going to do good and make the state or city more appealing to move to?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's already pretty appealing to move to, right? I mean, the real estate market is blowing up out here. But I think that there's quite a bit at play, right? I mean, the minimum wage is $11 an hour right now. We talk about, if you're on unemployment, you're looking at about $900 a month. Minimum wage, you're looking at just under $2,000 a month. And so, with the real estate prices rising and taxes going up, there's going to be obviously some tightened wallets here, but there's a lot of states that are well under $11 an hour, which is insane to me still. So, I mean, I guess it could be worse. In terms of the tax revenue increases, though, I mean, again, like you said, this is for people that are making $500,000 or more household, $250,000 individual. And so I don't necessarily see that as something that's going to scare off too many people. But, we got to do something about the education. I think that's why this got passed. We got to do something about the education, Dustin. So, we'll be interested to see what happens here.
Yeah, my biggest worry is that, I mean, I know you mentioned the 250K or more. I mean, those that are making that amount are the ones that are probably bringing jobs here. Though they're business owners, and if you start taxing them too much, they're going to move to other places like Texas. And so, as much as we've been growing, I worry that in the near future, that's going to plateau and eventually decrease, which will then negatively impact the job market here. Um, the housing market would start to go down, and Arizona wouldn't be as thriving as it is now. I mean, to your point, education here is I think funded near the bottom in terms of all the states. But it's again, it'll be interesting to see, does more money going to education, is that going to better the state as it comes from maybe those business owners, or what that may look like?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think there's a lot of interesting legislation that we have that helps a little bit in terms of like incubation, sandboxes, but venture dollars aren't really pouring in here, which is another consideration that I always kind of use the barometer for how many exciting businesses are really moving here and starting here, and seeing that we're well behind like places like Austin, Texas, or Denver compared to Phoenix, one of fifth largest city. It's like kind of scratch your head and go, well, why is that not happening?
Yeah,
this probably isn't going to help that. Okay, well, before we get into the next story, I want to mention that we are powered by State 48. If you haven't heard of them, you've been sleeping under a rock. Pull your earplugs out. I don't know how you haven't heard of them if you haven't, but amazing business here in Arizona. Clothing for all, inspired by Arizona. It's a really amazing brand that they've created. But Dustin, anything you want to mention about State 48?
Yeah, awesome clothing, and they're also creating great partnerships here in the community. Bunch of small businesses helping with their marketing efforts by creating awesome shirts, and then they're also partnering with a lot of nonprofits, and the proceeds do go to those nonprofits initiatives. So just doing a lot in the community. Check them out, state48.com.
Sweet. Well, getting into our next story, WhatsApp finally begins rolling out payment services in India. This is the largest market for WhatsApp, 400 million people using WhatsApp. And Facebook has been trying to make this happen for a while. I mean, they had their own currency. They had the support of businesses like PayPal and Visa, bought into it. And then a lot of red tape has pushed it back a little bit. But it's not in the US, but it is in India now. And all that it requires is that you have a bank account and a debit card attached to a bank in India. This is insane, Dustin, in terms of what this can do. You're now embedding payment services directly into a social media app. What do you think the repercussions are going to be of this in terms of consumer behavior? And do you think this is coming to the U.S.? Like, what's gonna happen here?
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge market that they are now in. Over there in India. I think it's great. I think financially, most people are behind the times. It's crazy that whenever you go to transfer any money, it takes a couple days, and you're charged a fee and all this. So I mean, in terms of it coming here to America, I think there's quite a few different apps that already do that. Venmo. I mean, PayPal, you can do it. So I think there's quite a bit of competition, but I mean, to your point, it is embedded into a social platform where people are already communicating. So it's like, if you're already communicating with the person that you're going to pay, you're probably not going to leave the app to go to Venmo and then pay them. If it's embedded right there, you're going to make that payment. And so I think they could take some market share in America as well. And so I think it's huge for WhatsApp. And I don't know where the United States is right now in terms of their ban with WhatsApp and TikTok and all that. I know TikTok just released something yesterday, I believe, asking where things are at with that. So I don't know how tough it'll be for them to incorporate this into America, but I think it's awesome. I think
this is obviously going from WhatsApp to Facebook. Facebook has pretty dynamic presence in the Facebook marketplace. They're starting to embed their advertisements into products on Instagram. I mean, you can buy things at the click of a button without even leaving the app. And so, for e-commerce, this creates a huge opportunity, right? Like, I mean, now I can embed my website into my Instagram post and have somebody pay for it without leaving. Now I can send money directly through Facebook Marketplace to buy the $50 chair that I'm picking up. Like, these are things that are going to keep people's attention more on Facebook, another revenue stream for Facebook. And, definitely, frankly, a move that I do support. I think that they do have a monopoly in some regard as it relates to the family of apps. But as it relates to this specifically, I think this is going to just be a great opportunity for small businesses. And I have to be an advocate of that for forever. So this is something that I think is going to help them a whole lot.
Yep. Agreed.
Getting to our next story, Spotify to let artists promote music for a cut in royalty rates. Dustin, musicians condemn payola-sized deal to give some songs an algorithmic boost. Essentially, what's happening here is that artists and labels can identify music that is a priority to them, and they can flag that song to reduce their cut of royalties in exchange for that song showing up at the top of the stack on a radio station inside of Spotify or in a suggested inside of Spotify. So while it can be a traffic booster, there are obviously questions about how fair this is or how legal this is. So Dustin, what are your thoughts? Is this good for the consumer?
I mean, it's I think it's a good move. I think it is good for the consumer. I think as long as they're paying attention to that algorithm, and that algorithm is focused on the consumer and not on reducing royalties. I think if you start going to the financial way, you're gonna mess up the user experience, and people are gonna leave the platform. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you're just giving artists all it is advertising. You're exchanging potential revenue. So it actually shifts the liability from the artist over to Spotify, because if no one listens and there's no royalties, they're not getting paid, and they could have boosted someone else that would have made money. And so at the end of the day, artists, they want to get their music heard. People want to hear new music. I'm sure that it's only going to be certain playlists, whatever it may be. And so I think if it's executed correctly, I think just like anything else, it comes down to the execution. I think this is poised to change the model and how artists can be found and how people can find new music and all that. But again, it's
all going to drive the market down for what the value of a stream is. I think that's a bigger consideration, is how much am I getting paid for somebody listening to this? And now you're going to have a bunch of artists coming out of the woodwork saying, I don't even need my royalties. I just want to have people listen. And what does that do for the people that actually make money and this is their livelihood? I think that's one consideration. They're talking about less than a cent per stream, which makes it pretty hard to make a living unless you have a couple million streams a month or whatever. But I also look at it and go, we're going to live and die by the algorithm here. I mean, this is what happened with Google. This is what happened with Facebook. Now the algorithm is going to have complete control over the experience. And, I wonder what that does for a consumer when now, they're being fed things based on the data that they don't know about, and Spotify saving money because they don't have to pay people streaming costs. Like it ends up benefiting the business more than anybody.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, the monthly active users will be the number that we look at to see whether this is negatively impacting the user experience. Because as soon as you negatively impact it, people are so quick to leave, and so that they're rolling the dice right now. And now we're gonna see where they fall and see what happens. I mean, it could be good, it could be bad, but
touche.
Excited to see.
Touche. Getting into our final story here, we kind of touched on it earlier, but Arizona's education funding bill, Prop 208, passes. This is a big deal, right? It imposes a 3.5% additional tax on income tax for individuals making over 250K, families making over 500K. And this tax increase is supposed to go to education. The Invest in Education Act is going to be on the ballot. And I'm just wondering here, we have a bunch more revenue coming in. You talk about this affecting hundreds of thousands of families here in Arizona, generating upwards of $3.5–4 billion in additional tax revenue, Dustin. Getting money isn't enough to say, oh, we've got a better education system now because we have a bunch of money, right? Like even spending the money isn't necessarily enough. What does this need to be used for, or how can this money be used so that we can actually have a better education system here?
Yeah, no, I think you hit the nail on the head that, we're going to have more money, but I don't think money solves the problem with education in Arizona or America for that matter. I mean, you bring it up in front of anyone and most people will say, you don't need to find the circumference of a circle or find X. I mean, there are some applications in today's world where you need that, but for the most part, 90% of what you're being taught in school, you're not going to use. I mean, there's balancing checkbooks. There's so much, there's many more things that could be taught than what's being taught now. And I think a majority of the money, or a big chunk of the money, should be going to thinking ahead. How should the education system look differently as we move forward? It hasn't changed in 80 years. You got 4 walls, you got a teacher, you got 30 students, and it hasn't changed. And what's being taught still hasn't changed at all.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I mean, you think about the social skill application part of schooling being essential, but just the social application doesn't make you have a better, framework for learning, right? So I think, obviously we need to be back in the classroom is my first point here, but I don't know, like, okay, cool. We buy everyone an iPad to use. Now, like, we're going to be playing games on those while we're supposed to be working. Like, just because we have money. I mean, and I don't know if that's going to be something where we can attract better teachers with that money. I don't know if it's something where we can hire some better superintendents to come up with better curriculums. Like, I don't know what it is that money is going to do, but I feel like if we just pour it into getting everybody a computer, like, it'll help a little bit. But, the teachers are clueless in terms of how to integrate that into the learning.
Mm-hmm.
We're learning about World War II generals more than we're learning about how the world works in 2020. And so I think it's tough,
No, I totally agree. And to your point, I have a nephew that goes to school in Yuma, and they have iPads and all that. So I think everyone already has all that stuff. But to your point, the person educating might not necessarily know how to work that iPad. And I think it's we do so much personalization in today's world. I don't understand why we can't do that in education, where we identify strengths and weaknesses in someone and kind of gear a curriculum or whatever it may be towards what someone likes and all that. But I'm hoping that it changes the way education is done, rather than just pouring more money into devices and resources and stuff like that.
And I just worry that, if we get too trigger happy with all the technology, that we're going to forget that a large part of your experience growing up and being a kid is going to school, having friends, learning how to work with people, learning how to work in teams, playing sports. If we lose all of that, I think we lose humanity a little bit. And it's a shame to see what was happening this last school year, right? And so I'm hoping that we can get back to, being in person. But a lot of stuff on here to unpack, obviously, Dustin. I look back through these stories. One thing that I think is huge right now is, these antitrust laws are coming out, and we're starting to see the muscles be flexed by the government. Again, I don't know if it's just flexing in the mirror, if they're actually going to do something about it, but they've put up plenty of lawsuits for all of these big companies, and Visa joining the mix. And it'll be interesting to see how this gets handled and how quickly they come to an agreement here on what should be done.
Yeah, no, my favorite one was the 208. It wasn't really for it. I think there's other ways that we can drive revenue and fund education, but now that it's passed, I'm interested to see how those funds are used. And now that the funds are there and we're moving forward with it, there's lots of opportunity, and we could be the forefront of the country when it comes to education. And so let's make it happen.
Hopefully. Well, thank you guys again for tuning in. Again, you've been watching the Non-Corporate Network, the worldwide leader in entrepreneurship. This has been Entreprenews. And we just appreciate you guys tuning in. Again, it's not free. I'm sorry. Tell a business owner about us. Tell a friend about us. We want to keep you guys woke with the undiluted truth of what's going on in the small business world. Dustin, anything you want to tell the people?
No, appreciate you guys tuning in. We will see you guys Friday.
Check us out. We're all over. Just type in Entreprenews. You can find us anywhere. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you guys Friday.